Welcome to Fabulous Lake Tahoe, your local's guide to the very best of America's year-round playground. I'm Jack Durst, and this is my open letter to the Sierra Club and Earthjustice about their opposition to the adoption of the TRPA General Plan. It is really easy to fall in love with Lake Tahoe, and I've got to sympathize with you guys wanting to protect Lake Tahoe because I want to protect Lake Tahoe too. I'm an environmentalist myself. I've been to the Tahoe Summit. In fact, I covered it in about 10 times the detail anyone else has ever covered the Tahoe Summit. I cover green building issues in Tahoe whenever I can. I am also a local who has grown up and lived in Lake Tahoe all his life. I'm telling you this because I don't want you to think that I'm on the other side from you guys. I am not some pro-development radical. I'm an environmentalist just like you are. But it is very easy to fall into the cognitive illusion that Lake Tahoe is a place that is barely inhabited. Everybody wants to put the pretty thumbnail on their blog, and I'll admit this for myself because I'm as guilty of it as anyone. If I have the choice between showing you guys a beautiful lakeshore scene like this and showing you an ugly strip mall with power lines, 9 times out of 10 I'm going to show you the beautiful picture of the pristine Lake Tahoe because that's what you want to see. That's what you're going to click on, that's what you're going to positively comment on. But if we want to get real for a minute, this is the architectural world that I live in on a day-to-day basis. We all have this image in our heads of Lake Tahoe and how things should and shouldn't be here in Lake Tahoe. And sometimes we have a tendency to reason based on the image in our heads instead of the reality on the ground. The problem with Lake Tahoe's architecture is that Lake Tahoe was built in a rush in the 1950s and 60s in order to take advantage of the publicity of the Squaw Valley Winter Olympics up here in Lake Tahoe in 1960. And when we built most of the buildings in Lake Tahoe, there was no such thing as the notion of a shore zone or a stream zone. This enormous parking lot I'm standing in drains directly to Lake Tahoe, less than 10 feet away from the shores of Lake Tahoe. Yet nobody does anything about it because we're all so petrified of that image of bulldozers in the Lake Tahoe environment. Well, frankly, some of these buildings are reaching the end of their natural architectural life, and it's becoming structurally necessary to replace them. Some of these buildings simply need to be removed or restored for purely aesthetic purposes because they're ugly. But we can't let that image in our head determine how we think about Lake Tahoe because the image in our head very often leads us wrong. And in this video, I'm going to show you some great examples of places where the image in your head is completely counter to what the actual environmental impact of the things that they're doing are. I have been so frustrated over the last 3 years of doing my channel in Lake Tahoe about the fact that whenever I see a positive environmental development in Lake Tahoe, it's blocked by the people who call themselves environmentalists. Up at Cabin Creek on the North Shore, they want to build a biomass plant. Now, look, I understand just how upsetting the idea of a huge smokestack in Lake Tahoe can be. I know there's this impulse when you're thinking about Lake Tahoe to treat every tree as if it's sacred. But you can't treat every tree as sacred when half of the trees are dead and ready to burn down. Trees like this are a fire hazard, and unfortunately Lake Tahoe's forests are reaching a cycle in which they are going to have to be actively managed. It is not a choice. What, we're going to burn the town down? We really don't have a choice of whether we actively manage our forests or not. If we fail to build the biomass plant at Cabin Creek, all of the wood from the dead trees in Lake Tahoe will have to be burned out in the open, resulting in 4 times the soot, the emissions, a much less efficient burning of the wood involved, and with a biomass plant, we actually get energy for burning that wood. Right now, it hangs as a polluting smog over Lake Tahoe whenever we have a controlled burn. Once we build the biomass plant at Cabin Creek, we will have 1/4 the emissions from wood burning in Lake Tahoe, and we will have a local renewable source of energy besides. It is environmentally insane to oppose the Cabin Creek project, even if it is one of those smokestack in Tahoe moments where you really wouldn't do it if you had any better choice. We didn't build it right the first time, and the simple fact is, if we disinhabited Lake Tahoe tomorrow and left the built environment in place, that rotting built environment would be destroying water quality for a century to come. A century! Water quality will continue to decline if we do absolutely nothing. And that's why building nothing is not a viable option in Lake Tahoe. We have already made some terrible mistakes that have to be rectified, and rectifying those mistakes is going to take money and it's going to take construction. This is my favorite park in Lake Tahoe. It's called the Motta Trailhead. It leads to Nevada Beach. And it's a perfect example of exactly how hard it can be to determine whether something is disturbed or not in Lake Tahoe. To look at this park, you would think that it had been a beautiful undisturbed meadow since Washoe times, and you would be absolutely wrong. This was once Sky Harbor International Airport, where everyone who flew into Tahoe from about 1920 to 1950 flew into Lake Tahoe. It was a notoriously scary airport because you went in the drink if you missed the runway. And in order to build it, they had to straighten out Burke Creek behind me in such a way that it was dumping huge amounts of sediment into the lake. It sat empty for 20 years until there was an uproar over the possibility of building a casino on this site. And then the people came together and they did something truly amazing. They deeded the land to the Lake Tahoe Conservancy, and the Conservancy hired a landscape architect who built this beautiful meadow that you see. This is not an actual undisturbed meadow. This is a landscape architect's award-winning fantasy of an undisturbed meadow. And in this particular case, though it's really hard to see bulldozers moving through a beautiful natural environment, I have to remember that this environment would only be here if it were for the bulldozers. Because if there had been no bulldozers, this would still be an overgrown vacant lot. If there had been no development at all, this would be back to being forest by now. The bulldozers in Lake Tahoe are not always doing environmental harm. Sometimes they're doing wonderful restoration projects like this. But we can only do restoration projects like this if we have the resources. And to have the resources to do this means that we have to have a local economy that generates both people who care passionately about Lake Tahoe, both as tourists and locals, and that generates the money necessary for us to do the environmental work that so desperately needs to be done here. The simple fact is, Tahoe is beloved around the world because people come here. If we don't have that tourist economy that brings people to Lake Tahoe and builds our national and international fame, people are going to be a hell of a lot less passionate about taking care of this beautiful natural wonder we have. It's because people get to come here, because they get to fall in love at first sight, like all of us who live here in Tahoe fell in love at first sight. It's because of that they care so deeply, that they're willing to contact their own congressman across the country and tell him to support environmental restoration at Lake Tahoe. But if we can't build, we do not have the population base, or the tax base, or eventually even the tourist base to be able to swing the political influence necessary to do the $1 trillion worth of restoration work that needs to be done at Lake Tahoe. We shouldn't disinhabit Lake Tahoe. I want a Lake Tahoe where there's music in the air in the summertime. I want a Lake Tahoe that people come and enjoy and fall in love with just like I have. But to be able to do that, we have to build an economy that can be sustained, that can generate the revenue necessary for us to make the huge investment in environmental restoration that has to be made in Lake Tahoe. $1 trillion isn't just going to magically appear out of nowhere. Please lobby the federal government to give us some of that money, but the simple fact is we're going to have to earn a lot of that money ourselves. And in order to earn that money, we have to have an economy. We have to have an economy that can be taxed, that can produce property taxes and income taxes to drive the environmental restoration we need up here in Tahoe. There are actually a lot more arguments that I have in favor of restoring Lake Tahoe in an environmentally responsible way. Click on the annotation to see all the additional arguments I filmed for this video that didn't make the cut. And check out my environmental playlist to see all of my other coverage of the delicate environment here in Lake Tahoe. So, thumbs up if you enjoyed this video. Subscribe to Fabulous Lake Tahoe if you haven't already. Thank you, and keep Tahoe blue. Bye.